Hello and welcome to another Ostrich video. At the moment we are here in Berlin-Tegel and getting ready to depart to Amsterdam Schiphol. But as you may have guessed from the title of this video, we will never reach our planned destination. When we reach our cruise altitude of 38,000 feet, we will experience a rapid depressurization that is not controllable, so that we have to perform an emergency descent and find a suitable diversion airport. And in this video I will show you how to deal with this situation in our sim. The first source I used for research is QNH, the Quick Reference Handbook that you can find in the PMDG Operations Center. And the second source I used is a video from a guy called Mentour Pilot, and he is flying a real 737 for a living and makes some really interesting videos about aviation. And the link for the one where he talks about rapid depressurization and emergency descent is in the video description. So if you want, you can check it out. The setup of the 737 to get started wouldn't be any different from a normal flight. In fact, the pilots wouldn't know it at this moment that they would experience a rapid depressurization, and when they would know it, they wouldn't depart in the first place. So I just skip this point and see you back in the sky when the ATC cleared us for our final cruise altitude, and we can then program the failure into our failure system. So see you back in the sky. Climb and maintain flight level 380, bird 56. So we confirmed our clearance for our final altitude, so we put now 38,000 feet in our NGX. 38,000 feet is right about there. Press altitude interview, and now we will start our climb to our final altitude. We give the FMC a couple of seconds more so that he can now calculate our new top of climb. And with this done, we go to the FMC, we go to program, and we will reach our top of climb 6 minutes after 9, and that's in 14 minutes. Armed with this information, we go back to the FMC menu, PMDG setup, aircraft, failures, and then we go to craft page because the pressurization failures are the last point. So pressurization, programmed, pressure hull integrity, and then we want an armed process. If you say active, it goes off immediately, but armed is much better because you have a little bit of surprise when exactly it happens. So yes, and as we already talked a bit, like now 13 minutes and 30 seconds. Put it in and then execute, and now in 30 minutes 30 seconds our pressurization system will fail. Very nice, and we can go back to the FMC and now just continue our climb. So we are coming up to 30,000 feet now, 8,000 feet to go, and once this altitude warning horn appears, the workforce gets immediately divided between first officer and captain, and it doesn't play any role who is pilot flying and who is pilot monitoring at this point. They have to perform something called memory items, and memory items are items from a non-normal checklist that has to be accessed by memory, for the simple reason that they have to be accessed fast and you don't have the time to reach for the appropriate checklist as you would have in most emergencies. The first thing to do there is getting the mask on and put it to 100% oxygen and establish crew communications. And the reason that this is so important, and this gets trained to the level where pilots have like a reflex when they hear this altitude horn to grab the oxygen mask, is the reason why we pressurize the aircraft in the first place. At altitude, the air is much less dense, and therefore the oxygen, we wouldn't have enough oxygen to breathe properly, and our brain, our body would fairly quickly suffer from hypoxia, a lack of oxygen, and our vision would start to fade, our motoric abilities would suffer, our ability to think would suffer, and finally we would get unconscious. And that's a bad thing if you have to fly a plane. And at 40,000 feet, we have a time of useful consciousness of 15 seconds. That means in this 15 seconds, our brain is still functioning normal, and after this 15 seconds, we start to suffer from hypoxia. And 15 seconds is not much. When we go a bit deeper, like 35,000 feet, we already have 30 seconds. At 1,500 feet, we would have about half an hour. And at sea level, we would basically have our lifetime minus the times we are completely drunk. So, but you see, at the altitudes we are normally flying, and in our case, it's 38,000 feet. We would have approximately 20 seconds of useful consciousness. And we need this time to get the mask on, 100% oxygen, and establish crew communication, check that our colleague is fine, and we don't have to deal with a pilot incapacitation on top. And in the meantime, we can also look at pressurization panel. Normally pilots do it regularly on climb, and we see our differential pressure is already in the yellow area, so I would say we have to look out for something. And you see our cabin is still quite low. Normally we are at about 8,000 7,000 feet, and we are a little bit over 5,000, so I would already suspect that something is going to happen here. But could be also, as we are still in the climb, could be normal as well. So now we just climb the last bit, wait for the altitude horn, and then go on with the procedures. So there's the altitude warning, we get the mask on, 100% oxygen, then we go to the audio control panel and switch it from headset to mask, establish crew communication, make sure that our colleague is fine. The first officer would go to the pressurization panel, put the auto valve in manual and close it, and we will hope that this solves the problem. But you actually see nothing is happening here. We can cancel the altitude warning, the cabin isn't descending, also this shows something. The captain would probably already ask, do you have the cabin under control? And the answer is clearly no. And so we would now announce that we have to do an emergency descent. So the first officer would now go to the upper head. We see the passenger oxygen is already on automatically, but he would lift the hob and put it on manually, so that we don't take chances. Then he would put the seatbelt signs on, all the lights we have, so that we are better visible. Put the engines to continuous, go to the center pedestal, stroke 7700, and put the transponder to TA only. And then he would contact ATC, declare emergency, that we perform an emergency descent, and ask for the local QNH. In the meantime, the captain would go on the PA and announce emergency descent, emergency descent, emergency descent 3 times, so that the cabin crew knows, get seated wherever you are. If it's on the floor, if it's on the seat, if it's on a passenger slab, doesn't matter, get seated. Then he would wind down the altitude on the MPC. We would turn 45 degrees off course. So set this, level change, and we would speed up a bit. Then pull the thrust levers back and extend the speed brakes. And we wouldn't speed up if we hear the bang or something else that indicates that the structural integrity of the aircraft is damaged. But if not, we would speed up to the maximum possible. And the reason is that in level change, the aircraft tries to maintain the speed by dropping the nose. And then when we done all this, we set the MCP correctly, that's for 10,000 feet or our safe altitude. If we are over the Alps, we couldn't descend to 10,000 feet because we would risk crashing into the mountain. But here over northern Germany, that's not a deal at all. And you should always, as pilot, know your self-altitudes. So as we are now on the emergency descent, I can explain why we did what we did. It's important to know that our emergency descent isn't cleared by ATC. So that's why we put all the lights on, so that our aircraft have an easier job in seeing us. As we were on an airway, we turned 45 degrees off, because on the airway we have a good chance that an aircraft is below us, and we just want to avoid crashing into them. And ATC would call us back now, for example, and give us the local QNH. And we get this from active sky weather request, current active weather, next. Altimeter setting is 1008 millibar, next, back, and close the window. And we would now set 1008 millibar and switch to our local QNH. And we do this because we want to descend to 10,000 feet above sea level and not flight level 100, what could be higher. And then the last thing we did was setting our transponder, and we squawked 7700 because this is the emergency code, and we switched our TCAS system to TA only, so that we get only informed about the traffic, because we don't want our resolution advisory telling us traffic, climb. Would be pretty stupid in emergency descent, and so we set it to TA only, so we won't get this, and all the other aircraft around us, their TCAS systems would know that we don't respond and tell them to climb instead of us. In the meantime, now on the descent, the first officer would talk to ATC and monitor our descent. He would call out every 10,000 feet, and then 2,000 to go, 1,000 to go. And the captain would fly the aircraft, looking out for traffic, and basically fly the aircraft. And we see we are diving into a cloud layer. We have January, it's pretty cold, and so we probably encounter icing conditions, so we go to our headset and engage anti-ice. Very nice, and we continue our descent. And in the meantime, the first officer would also monitor our pressurization panel, and you see the cabin is descending very slowly. And you have to also bear in mind that the cabin is always behind the aircraft. You can cancel the master caution. So we are coming up to 20,000 now, so the first officer would announce 20,000, 10,000 to go, and we would say check. And this is not only important to check the altitude, but also as check that our colleague is still fine and working, and we don't have to deal with a pilot incapacitation on top. So the first officer would call 2 to go, and we verify this, and then we would start to bring back our speed, because the speed limit under 10,250. So we bring back speed 250, and you see now the aircraft starts level off gently. 1,000 to go, we can bring back the speed brakes, but as we have to do a lot of speed, we leave them in for a second, and we come in closer for 5,000 feet. So now we pull back the speed brakes, and we look at our pressurization panel, and you see our cabin is slightly above 10,000 feet. The cabin is always a little bit behind, but let's see. Yeah, better we don't take chances, so we go down to 9,000. So now we are below 10,000 and our cabin is at or slightly above 10,000. So let's go this last 1,000 feet. The aircraft is descending very slowly now as we have to bring back the speed. So as soon as we hit our 250, our descent rate will get a little bit higher again. And we can look at our pressurization panel. Yeah, that's slightly below 10,000, so very nice. And below 10,000 cabin altitude, the first officer, usually it's the first officer, would now take its mask off and test if the air is breathable. So he would take it off slightly, and if he feels anything wrong, he would put it back on, and if not, he puts his headset on and says the air is breathable. And before he does his test, he of course hands over all the radios and what he is doing to the captain. Well, let's say the air is breathable, so he would switch back to the headset and tell the captain, and so the captain can take his mask off and switch back to the headset as well. So everything is nice. Here on the instruments, visibility is bad because we're on the cloud layer. And now the captain would go onto the PA and call number 1 to the flight deck, or however you call your person or chief flight attendant in your company. And this call is very important because it tells the cabin crew the air is breathable, you can take your mask off and do your work, calming down passengers, securing the cabin, and so on and so forth. And of course we want the cabin report from our number 1. So she would come onto the flight deck and reports how the passengers are doing, how the crew is doing, if they see any damage in the aircraft, and so on and so forth. So in our case, the crew is fine. Passengers are suffering from severe ear pain. Some are even bleeding from there, so they have probably a fractured eardrum. But luckily, no fatalities. And she tells us that the window at our rear aft door is broken. It's blown out, and we would thank her for this information and send her back into the cabin, and now start to discuss with our first officer what we would do. And we have to find a diversion airport, and for this we first have to know where we are. And as pilot, you should always have a good sense of where you are, and depending on our route, and if we go to the north, we must be somewhere over the North Sea coast of Germany, so probably between Emden and Bremen. And we can go to our FMC, init ref, alternate destination, and now we can look for nearest airport. And I think this is Bremen, or this. Something with W definitely is Bremen. So that's right, but the version we do is we go to World and look at the map. And as you see on the map, our prediction was correct. We have Bremen Airport here and Emden Airport here, and we are somewhat in the middle. And now we would discuss with our first officer which airport we want to divert to. And the first thing we have to take in consideration is the state of our aircraft. So our flight attendant told us that the window of the aft door was blown out. So to be honest, that's not such big of a defect. I mean, we have a loss of pressurization, what is pretty evil, but apart from this, it's not a big deal. So it's the aft door, so there's no chance that debris got sucked into the engine and damaged it. And also, it's only the window, so the chance that it damaged our stabilizer on the way out is also pretty slim. And on the way down, we didn't experience anything that the aircraft is unstable or unsafe to fly. So the safety of the aircraft is not in danger, and bringing the aircraft down as soon as possible is not really necessary. So we can maybe choose a diversion airport that is a bit further away. So we zoom out and we see we have a lot more options now. And in particular, we have Hamburg Airport here. And the second point we want to take in consideration are our passengers. A lot of them are complaining about ear pain. Some are already bleeding from the ear, and we have to say it generally. So a lot of people probably have a cold, and with a blocked sinus, they can't equalize the pressure. And this is already very painful if you sit in an aircraft with a working pressurization system. Our system is failed, and so the cabin will descend at the same rate as our aircraft. So for our passengers, we want to aim for a very, very smooth descent. And to be fairly honest, going to a Bremen airport, we wouldn't have enough distance for a smooth descent. And with Hamburg, the distance is good enough to descend smoothly. And also another factor, I know Hamburg Airport. I've been there several times and I never landed in Bremen. And I guess every pilot, if he has a choice in this situation, would take the airport he or she is familiar with. The last thing we want to check before we finally decide for Hamburg is the weather in Hamburg. So we go to active sky, conditions, and Hamburg is already in. And you see wind is okay, visibility is okay, and I mean it's not a nice day, but it's good enough to land there. So this is checked, and we decide now to divert to Hamburg. So we are back on the flight deck, and our first officer would now contact ATC, telling them that we want to go to Hamburg Airport, and we want a descent rate at our own discretion, so that we can descend as smooth as possible. And we also have here our alternate destinations. We go to alternate destination, and then press EH for Hamburg and check that we have enough fuel, but in Europe fuel is usually not a problem as Europe is littered with airports. So this is done. We go to route, press page, now set Hamburg as destination, execute this. ATC would now say us, yes, you are cleared to Hamburg, go direct to LBVOR, and then expect ILS to runway 15. So let's program this in. So departure arrival in Hamburg ILS, and we go direct to the ILS, so no transition, no start. Execute this, then we go to the next page and program the LBV1, and this is Lima Bravo Victor. Put it on, choose the right VOR. Then we take the entry point for the ILS, DBOT, set it in and execute everything. Then we go to LNAV so that the aircraft flies now away. We can go to plan and just check our route, so we see the LBVOR, and then go directly onto the ILS. So we can switch back to map, increase the range so that we see our whole route. Set our altitude, what will be the entry altitude for the ILS, so 3000 feet. 3000 feet. And now we pop this up so that it's visible. Go to VS and now set our descent rate. And let's start with 200 feet per minute. And we're aiming for this routine arc, and you see it's off the roof and we have to be at 3000 about here. So we adjust our descent rate, let's get 300. And you see we are coming closer, but still not good enough, so we get 350. Still not, like 400 feet, and this gives us definitely a descent back there. We are at our entry point at 3000 feet at the most gently possible descent rate we have. So very nice. With this information we just take a short look at our program. So we see we will reach Hamburg at 9:40, what is in about 20 minutes. So we would now call our number 1 back to the flight deck, tell her that we are decided to go to Hamburg, that they should secure the cabin, keep the passengers calm, and get a list of the passengers who will need medical attention. And now it's time to inform the passengers and count them down. So think a minute about what you want to say at your PA, take a deep breath to calm yourself down, and then start. Dear ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. As you may have noticed, we had a little problem with the cabin pressure. The situation is under control now, and there's no reason to worry for your safety. Unfortunately, we won't be able to reach our planned destination and will divert to Hamburg Airport instead. We reach Hamburg in about 30 minutes time. In the meantime, please stay seated, keep your seatbelts fastened, and put your seat in an upright position. If you weren't at your seat when the incident occurred, return to your seat now, please. If you are in need of medical attention, please advise our cabin crew so that we can rally you to the ground and prepare the paramedics for our arrival. For your ongoing travel, we will inform you as soon as we're on the ground. Please follow the instructions of our cabin crew and stay calm. So, everything nice. Now it's just reaching Hamburg and then do a normal ILS approach. So nothing special about this. And for me it's time to end the video. I hope you liked it, and if you have questions, as always, write it in the comments below and I try to answer them as quickly and correctly as possible. Also check out the links in the video description, they're definitely worth it. And see you next time. Bye bye.